to make a series of films that explore all the different elements that make Copenhagen a truly bicycle-friendly city. And there's a lot of different details involved, a lot of the design and infrastructure details, but we thought it important to start with the big picture. Most cities in the world are incredibly car-centric. We've had 100 years of really what is failed traffic engineering and planning of cities based on a car-centric mentality. Planners and engineers think car first, and everybody else is sort of left in the dust. So a modern city here in this new millennium is a city that prioritizes differently, that focuses on how to make a city a more livable place, a safer place, a healthier place. And in doing that, you need to prioritize bicycles, pedestrians, and public transport. And of course, we focus on bicycle culture at Copenhagenize Design Co. So highlighting these details of what makes Copenhagen so bicycle friendly. I think what defines the big picture in bicycle planning in Copenhagen is the uniformity of the bicycle network. In Copenhagen and in Danish cities, there are 4 types of bicycle infrastructure. Number 1 is where you don't have any infrastructure, you have a 30 km/h zone or slower, so bicycles mixed with cars, shared space concept. We do have some bi-directional infrastructure. This is largely on bicycle paths, separated from the traffic. We don't even have very many of them in Copenhagen. Or in between 2 rural towns out in the country, there's a bi-directional path off to the side. Number 3 is painted lanes. You know, we still have them in some places in Copenhagen, and of course wide enough to accommodate 2 cyclists riding together. And then of course number 4, which is the fully separated and protected cycle tracks that you see almost all over the city. In Greater Copenhagen, there's about 1,000 kilometers of protected cycle tracks in the city of Copenhagen and all the surrounding municipalities that make up Greater Copenhagen. We know that this is the safest. We know that this is what makes people want to ride a bike, makes them feel safe, and it keeps them safe as well. When you only have 4 types of infrastructure, it makes it incredibly uniform. It makes it incredibly easy, with wayfinding. It's very logical. You can take your bike on the train and go to any other Danish city, get off the train, and you'll find bicycle infrastructure that you recognize, and you'll know that it'll probably take you somewhere. This uniformity in the Danish design of the bicycle infrastructure here is really one of the key elements to making Copenhagen a bicycle-friendly city. I think one of the things I like best about cycling in Copenhagen is that, for example, at no point do I have to push a button like a lot of pedestrians do in other cities, as a cyclist, and wait for permission to cross the street. I think this is an indication that bicycles are taken seriously as transport. Riding in Copenhagen, riding a bicycle to the kindergarten, to school, to the supermarket, to meetings, to work and whatnot, is a pleasant experience. Even in the middle of a snowstorm or in the 40-degree heat in the summer, the bicycle is the fastest way to get around this city. And other cities, if you make the bicycle, and you really work hard towards making the bicycle the fastest mode of transport from A to B, people will ride. That's why the people of Copenhagen ride. Prioritize the bicycle, and they will ride. If you build it, they will come. And I think that what's maybe taken 30, 35 years here, nice and slow, making mistakes, fixing them again, and establishing at the end of the day what really is a best practice in bicycle planning. This is possible for other cities to do in 5 to 10 years with the right political will and engineers and planners who know how to plan for bicycles and who are willing to think bicycle first.
The green wave is one of the best things about Copenhagen's bicycle culture because it's purely cyclist oriented. It leaves the car to the second place and thinks about cyclists. It started in 2007 in Norbergil. It was such a big success that it expanded to a total of 4 streets in Copenhagen. Most people have experienced green waves for cars. The idea is exactly the same, but just cyclists are on the top of the chain in this case. It's fairly simple. If you cycle at 20 kilometers per hour, you'll get green lights along the cycle track. Well, the green wave works in the rush hours. So in the morning rush hour, you have a green wave towards the city center, whereas in the afternoon rush hour, you have the opposite way. The green wave is safety oriented. It encourages faster cyclists to go slower, and also encourages slower cyclists to move a little bit faster. If they're part of the group and you get green lights all over the cycle track, it means you're part of the green wave. You're cycling at the right speed, in a speed that you're not endangering anyone else by cycling faster. The city has provided 2 other measures to complement the green wave. One of them is the radar sign, where the cyclist can know its own speed. The city has also provided the lights on the ground, so you'll know that you're actually in the green wave or not. One of my favorite parts of this measure is that you don't spend a lot of money. There's no specific gadgets that cyclists need to have with them. It's just a basic principle that it gives flow to the cyclists. I want to go from A to B and I don't want to stop, I don't want to be interrupted, I just want to go.
The bicycle should be able to be taken with you from the moment you step out of your front door of your home, wherever that may be in Copenhagen or the greater Copenhagen sprawl, and be at your side, or underneath you, of course, preferably, the entire day, without any hitches, without any difficulties or user unfriendliness. Different areas that require attention when we're trying to integrate the bicycle in intermodality. It's very important to consider accessibility, how the bicycles can work together with all the different public transport options that many cities have. So it's also important to consider first and last mile transport. And of course, making it accessible to park your bike is one of the very important keys to creating this healthy intermodal society. You can use the bicycle, of course, to get around the entire city on a network of protected cycle tracks. You can also take the bicycle with you on the metro. It costs a bit extra, but the bicycle is allowed with you everywhere you go. Our bus system here also has ferry boats that sail up and down the harbor, creating an important link in the infrastructure there. And of course, you can take your bicycle with you on these boats without any problem whatsoever. The local trains here in Copenhagen have been really visionary over the past few years about accessibility for bicycles. Before, it cost 10 kroner, 11 kroner. But then they made it free a couple years ago, completely free to take your bicycle with you on all of the local S trains. Another great thing that the Danish State Railways is doing is that they have a bicycle pump. There's many of them around Copenhagen now from the city, but they put one right outside the central train station. I think it's great to live in a city with a really well-designed airport that is quite close to the city center. And I can ride out there on fully separated, safe bicycle infrastructure. So if I'm taking a short trip, an overnight trip or a couple of days, and I only need a carry-on bag, I ride my bicycle to Copenhagen Airport. So the goal is to make the bicycle a part of our daily lives in cities. Make it convenient and safe to use in all the aspects of what we do and the things we do in our cities. Also, one of the greatest challenges remains how to get people to consider the bicycle as transport, how to get them out of their cars, onto bicycles, onto public transport. And like we said before here, A to B-ism is the key. If you make the bicycle the fastest way from A to B, people will use it. And this really is important to consider when you're trying to integrate bicycles with public transport. When you're creating the big picture of a bicycle-friendly city, a modern city that accommodates for bicycle traffic, it's amazing to see the whole network evolve, but it's also fantastic to regard the tiny details, the small safety details, if you like, the incredibly inexpensive solution to do, and it's had some really great results. One of the things that the city has been doing recently, over the last couple of years, is pushing back the stop line for cars, allowing the cycle track to continue up to the pedestrian crossing. The cyclists are visible, the motorist is aware, oh, there's cyclists there, there might be more coming up from behind. Another important aspect is pre-greens, and at busy intersections, the light turns green on the bicycle traffic light. Anything from a half a second or 2 seconds before the light turns green for the cars. So the cyclists are in motion when the motorist realizes the light's green, and they're already visible. But what the city has done in some places is create rumble strips in the paint to keep the cyclists, of course, on the straight and narrow so they don't veer out into traffic, which is in nobody's interest at all. But also for cars, so they don't venture into the bike lane. There are also some unique situations, some unique locations in Copenhagen where, for example, the curb is much lower. So there's a little thin stripe of rumble strips to make sure that the cyclists stay away from the curb. Allowing right turns on red for cyclists, going to keep people safe. They remove some of the cyclists around the corner so that there's sort of more space for the other cyclists who are waiting for the red light, which is very important in a city like Copenhagen with as many cyclists. The ultimate solution is really creating a cycle track that completely has nothing to do with the car lanes or the intersection. A cycle track that just curves to the right and does the automatic right turn. It eliminates completely the right hook problem. Situations in Copenhagen where there's no space for a bus island, the cyclists have to stop for the bus passengers who are getting off and going to the sidewalk. And a lot of passengers getting off those buses wanting to get over to the sidewalk, of course. So the city of Copenhagen is implementing more and more bus islands where the passengers of the bus get off onto a little island and they have to cross the cycle track to get over to the sidewalk. Since these began being implemented in Copenhagen, the number of bicycle pedestrian or bicycle bus passenger incidents has plummeted. This has been an excellent solution, and it creates that all-important flow, that momentum, that A to B-ism for cyclists.
Busiest bicycle street in the world. On average, daily, it's about 36,000 cyclists. But it hasn't always been like this. One of the things that the city of Copenhagen started doing about 5 years ago is they started implementing a series of initiatives and pilot projects to transform Nordberg from over-congested street full of fast-moving traffic to one of the best examples of urban cycling that we see today. So the first initiative that the city implemented was closing Nordberg to through traffic. This is particularly important in this neighborhood because it's a key entry point into the city of Copenhagen, yet only 19% of residents in Nordbro actually own a car. So they closed the street to through traffic, making it basically only open to buses and taxis and bicycles. The second thing that the city did is they implemented the green wave. It basically smooths the flow of bicycle traffic. And the third thing that the city did is they basically cut the car lane widths in half and doubled the width of the bicycle lane as well as the sidewalks. The effect that doubling the width of the cycle tracks and the sidewalks had was that it's made Nordberg a safer place for cyclists and pedestrians, and quite simply, it's made it a much more enjoyable place to be. But before these lanes were doubled, they were the standard Copenhagen width of 2.5 meters. You would see people lining up at the traffic lights on their bicycles. They'd wait for 2 or 3 rotations at once just to get through that one intersection. So doubling the width of the cycle lanes made it much more fast and appealing for people to choose Nordberg. So the city did one other tiny little detail that they added to Nordberg, and that is that they put benches along the bridge. They just put in 2, but almost overnight people recognized the bridge at the very start of Nordberg as a place where you could hang out, you could spend time. So not only did Nordberg become a fantastic place to ride your bike, it became a fantastic hangout place, and none of this would be possible if it weren't for those initial traffic calming initiatives.
Macro design represents the city's showcase projects, the crown jewels and missing links that make it so easy to get around the city of Copenhagen by bicycle. Copenhagen wouldn't be Copenhagen without the harbor, but the watery environment makes for a logistical challenge when trying to move people and goods over this watery environment. In 2006, a bridge was constructed to connect Vesterbro in the inner city with Iceland's Cay for Islandsfluga in the southern part of the city. Now, based on a study that was launched in 2012, 70% of the people traversing this bridge do so to get to work, so it makes their commute faster, and 9,000 people have used the bridge as of 2012 number. But luckily for Copenhagen, the city didn't stop with this one pedestrian and bicycle bridge. They have many plans for future developments, as many as 9 other bridges to connect the harbor sides. Probably the most eagerly awaited infrastructure project of the year is the Superslange, or the bicycle snake, which will link Vesterbro with the already completed bicycle bridge that I was talking about earlier. Now, this project is very exciting because it is expected to double the capacity of bicyclists going along this route. There are currently 2 bicycle superhighways in operation in Copenhagen and the greater Copenhagen area. The first is the Albertslund route, which extends to the west of the city for 17 kilometers. and the second is a farm route which goes to the north of the city for 16 kilometers. Along the way, there are bicycle footrests advertising the route and showing the path, and these are all painted in an iconic orange color. Along the route, which makes the route different from other cycle tracks in the city, is the fact that it is completely segregated from the highway, even though it is in such close proximity to the motorway. As of the 2012 bicycle accounts, the city of Copenhagen is planning 28 bicycle superhighways with a total of 400 kilometers. So when thinking about macro design, we have to think of the city as an entire integrated whole. So it's not just about lying cycle track in one neighborhood and forgetting it or leaving it to rot, but it's about connecting the system so that the users can interact with the cityscape and make their days easier and their journeys more enjoyable.
From an urban design perspective, all aspects of design are important. Macro design, the entire infrastructure network, bridges over the harbor for bikes and pedestrians, but also micro design is just as important. And in many ways, it's these tiny details on the urban landscape that are the most interesting and quite often the most fun. Trademarks of Copenhagen at the moment is innovation, thinking differently about how we can use micro design to broadcast a message or to be more helpful to people who are riding bicycles. Now every train station in Denmark has elevators for baby carriages and for bicycles and wheelchairs, but on the stairs you'll often see a little ramp. It makes it easier for the cyclists to come up and down the stairways. It has a very important accessibility function, but it is a great example of micro design. It's in addition to the existing stairway. People in Copenhagen, they don't know how amazing they are, in the global perspective. They just go from A to B and back again, and that's what they do every single day. They don't think that they're anything special. But having the counter there, and you can see that, wait a minute, 1.7 million people have ridden a bicycle past this point this year. If you don't know how many people riding bicycles in Copenhagen, you see a number on it, it really makes you feel a bit proud. It makes you feel amazed that so many people are riding bicycle, which is also a way to encourage more people to do so. One of the ideas that we had here at the company a few years ago, we suggested to the city of Copenhagen that they have the garbage cans on the street along certain stretches of cycle track. Why don't they tilt them, redesign them so that they tilt towards people riding bicycles? Because when you use your bicycle all day, every day, you often have garbage to throw out. On certain sections of the city's cycle track network now, on the very wide sections, we see some small arrows positioned off to the left of the middle of the cycle track. Now, the city of Copenhagen wanted to think about this concept of conversation lanes as a concept, and this has really become the goal for the bicycle office here, is to have space enough in every cycle track for two people to have a conversation on their bicycles and still have room off to the left for somebody to overtake them. One of the more interesting, I think, and fun additions to the bicycle culture here is that the city of Copenhagen has put up railings so that when you're waiting for the red light, you can hold onto the railing. You don't have to get off your seat, which is always irritating on a bicycle. You don't have to put your foot down. You can just hold onto the railing or put your foot on the footrest down below. And the text on many of the footrests is, "Hi cyclists, rest your foot here, and thank you for cycling in the city." This was a behavioral template that we designed for the city of Copenhagen's bicycle office. A very human little touch. It's a pat on the back, if you like, to the people who ride bicycles every day.
many elements why Copenhagen is so bicycle friendly.
Yeah.
There is one thing that probably impressed me most. It's about the use of cargo bikes made by Copenhageners. So, which are the elements that make easier to ride this kind of bikes.
Yeah. Without a doubt, one of the very unique aspects of life in Copenhagen and the bicycle culture here is the cargo bikes. There are about 40,000 cargo bikes in Greater Copenhagen, not just the municipality. There's a lot of amazing statistics about cargo bikes. 6% of Copenhageners have a cargo bike. 24% of all the families with 2 or more children have a cargo bike. And 17% of the people who have cargo bikes use it as a replacement for a car. Many of the other people will use it as a second car. Cities around the world are looking at cargo bike solutions for replacing short trips by car, for logistics in a city. One of the surest signs that cargo bikes are being taken seriously is a project that Copenhagenize design company is involved in, and it's called Psychologistics. It's a European project funded by the EU, and it's basically promoting the use of cargo bikes in 9 different European cities on 3 different levels. First of all, family transport. How to use a cargo bike to solve your daily transport needs, going shopping and whatnot, taking kids to the kindergarten as well. The second level is small goods delivery. Lots of shops in the city center can deliver their goods on cargo bikes, be it pedal powered or with an electrical assist motor. And then the third level is one that is probably the most interesting and the most challenging, and that is replacing larger logistics with cargo bikes. You can't have maybe a lot of boxes on this bike, but there are lots of kinds of cargo bikes that are much larger, in use right now in Paris, in Dublin, lots of other cities around the world. And getting the large logistics companies to stop at a depot outside the city center, and the last mile transport by bike.
I saw many women actually riding bikes in Copenhagen, and it's also interesting because usually it's not so common everywhere. So I would like to know, are cycling, and particularly cargo bikes, gender equal?
Today in Copenhagen, more than 50% of the cyclists are actually women. The same goes for the Netherlands, but in pretty much every other country in the world, these numbers are much more heavily male-dominated. So when we think about cycle promotion across all kinds of people, it's important to have an inclusive network of cycle track across the entire city. So making bicycle lanes wide enough across the entire city network and having plenty of amenities such as width, traffic signals, that makes it more user-friendly for everybody, not just women, but it's just more inclusive for everyone. There have been a number of studies that show women's trip patterns differ from men, and when planning cities, it's important to think of those gender differences and take that into account when planning for a street network. And so with cargo bikes, you can accomplish a variety of tasks at once. You can pick up children, and you can go grocery shopping, you can pick up friends, dogs, animals, anything. And so both men and women do those tasks.
If bicycles are a logical, rational transport form for cities, then cargo bikes are in the same category, and then some, because there's so many things you can do on a cargo bike, in so many ways that a city can benefit from cargo bike use. So this isn't sort of the whole the bike geek, the bike love thing, let's all just ride bikes. Cargo bikes are a logical addition to really any city in the world, whether it's 2 wheels or 3 wheels. This is the future of urban mobility.
Think of all the benefits for health.
This is also very important, taking away more space from cars.
Design has to be the most beautiful expression in urban planning. It was coined by the French philosopher Gaston Bachelard in the 1950s in his book, The Poetics of Space. But design lines are as old as Homo sapiens. All the winding streets of old cities were based on the desire lines of the people who first moved into the area and settled there. Desire lines have been used as a concept in landscape planning, in parks and whatnot, figuring out where to put the pathways based on the desire lines of the people who walk through the park. But we've rediscovered desire lines and are applying them to urban planning and bicycle urbanism in the cities that we're working in. We all know it from cities around the world, the focus that is placed on these master plans, these grand documents that are produced, a lot of money spent on them, showing us what the vision of the future will be for a city, projecting traffic flow and whatnot. But by and large, they are produced using computer models and projections and data and statistics. It makes you feel like you're a character in the Matrix. Master plans, if you look at it really for what it is, are a large waste of money. There are more effective ways of planning our cities for people. There are many subtle examples around the city as well. The city of Copenhagen, the bicycle office, they put in ramps, asphalt ramps on spots where people are taking shortcuts. Instead of erecting fences to restrict them in this behavior, they actually make it accessible for them, make it easier for them, because the people at the end of the day decide where they want to go. One of the examples I like to point out more than anything, it's on the world's busiest bicycle street. The city discovered that a couple hundred cyclists a day were cutting across a sidewalk in front of a building in order to get to a parallel street, in order to avoid the rush hour and all the bicycle traffic, but also because they were going to different destinations in the city. What to do? They could have stood there all day long and handed out tickets, penalizing these people for their behavior, crossing a sidewalk on their bicycles. But instead, the city of Copenhagen, to their credit, they stood back and watched, accepting the fact that there must be a very good reason for their behavior. A temporary cycle track was put into place, and it was finally made permanent. And the desire lines of just a few hundred people in this city were respected, and infrastructure was put into place based on them. And this is really the way forward for designing our cities for people, for bicycle traffic. By using basic human observation, direct human observation, we have a much more effective route to planning our cities and the movements of the people who live there, the desire lines of the citizens with whom we share the urban landscape. The last design element in this series is not an element in itself per se, but rather having a group of people in positions of responsibility who understand the importance of how to design a city for cyclists, how to design a more livable city for everybody who lives there. Copenhagen, we have been incredibly lucky to have had almost an entire generation of planners and politicians who have understood the importance of re-establishing the bicycle on the urban landscape and making the city a nicer place to live. We have now risen to the current levels of 36% of all Copenhageners arriving in the city of Copenhagen to their workplaces or their places of education on bicycles. But how do we keep on moving forward? That is the question. There is, of course, still investment in cycling as transport. We discussed the bridges being built across the harbor in the macro design episode of this series. In 2013, $50 million extra were allocated to cycling projects in the city of Copenhagen. There are political goals as well that were established back in 2006 of having 50% of all the commuters every day arrive at their workplace or their place of education on bicycles. This is all a sign that investment continues, and the goal of getting more people onto bicycles is in many cases taken seriously. But if you look outside the windows, if you look around the city, you can see that things have really stagnated quite a bit here in Copenhagen. The current climate at Copenhagen City Hall is not really conducive to improving conditions for getting more people onto bicycles. Over 1/3 of all short trips of under 5 kilometers in this city are still done in automobiles. We've had a policy for many years of removing car parking, 2 to 3% of it every single year, not just for bicycles, but for creating more livable spaces, planting trees. Last year, the Lord Mayor of Copenhagen decided to put back in 1,700 parking spots almost overnight, reversing really what was almost a decade of policy. And this is in a city where only 29% of the households actually own a car. Is there a need for 1,700 new parking spots? The latest fantastic idea coming out of City Hall is to create a harbor tunnel underneath Copenhagen Harbor. If there's one thing that we've learned from 100 years of traffic engineering, that is if you create more space for cars, more cars will come. There's a lot of work to be done to make this city more livable, better for pedestrians, better for cyclists, encouraging families to stay in the city instead of moving out to the suburbs. Good, modern, visionary political will is the foundation for recreating our livable cities. It's not just about Copenhagen or Amsterdam anymore. There are cities out there who are moving forward rapidly, and there are politicians leading these cities towards the new paradigm, the modern livable city. The mayor of Paris, for example, Delanoë, he has done amazing work over the past few years, putting in a fantastic bike share system, putting in 30-kilometer-an-hour zones. There's a mayor in Montreal, Luc Ferrandez, trying to plan this city for the next 100 years instead of using inspiration from the past 100 years. Copenhagen is ahead of the curve. It's a city that inspires many other cities around the world, but we have to maintain a leadership, inspiring other politicians to think differently, to think about the new paradigm. At the end of the day, for all this talk of bicycles as transport in Copenhagen and cities around the world, it really has nothing to do with the bicycle at all. The bicycle is merely a powerful symbol for what is possible in changing a city to become more livable. What we're doing in our work, what people are doing all around the world, is much more important. I like to think that the greatest monument that we've ever erected in Copenhagen and in Denmark is the bicycle infrastructure network that allows all of these people to ride bicycles safely and calmly throughout the city on all of their daily errands, to work and back, to the schools, to the supermarkets. This is a modern monument, and this is one that cities and citizens around the world should be working hard to erect. This is nothing less than monumental motion.